Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're opening up a stack of sources, primarily notes and transcripts, from a series of videos that plunge into a genuinely complex and charged space. The intersection of comedy, censorship, and the rapidly evolving world of AI.
Yeah, it's an area where the ground is shifting constantly, isn't it? Our mission in this deep dive is really to navigate these sources with you, extracting the most important points and insights.
Right, so you can quickly grasp what's happening as the traditional lines around acceptable humor are being challenged.
Exactly, and sometimes with significant real-world impact. We also want to look at how technology might be playing a surprising role in all this.
Okay, let's dive right into one of the central ideas coming out of these sources. There's this strong sense, it seems, that the world of comedy is being pushed towards an era of extreme caution.
Definitely. The material points to rising hypersensitivity and, well, a trend where humorists are facing pretty serious condemnation for their work.
So how do the sources illustrate that?
Well, one video described in the sources uses this powerful hypothetical skit to really nail the feeling.
Yeah.
It paints a picture of a comedian performing in, say, the year 2030.
Okay.
And they're trying to skirt a joke with those classic setups, a Jew, a rabbi, or a priest.
And stop, like mid-setup.
Precisely. According to the description in the source, the comedian reportedly stops cold, just abandons it.
Why? Fear of offending.
Yeah, an overwhelming fear of causing offense. They apparently can't even get past the opening line without anticipating some kind of backlash.
Wow. So the joke itself never even materializes. What was the punchline they eventually landed on in this cautious future?
Right. So the sources detail the comedian finally opting for this incredibly safe setup and conclusion. A parrot enters a certified organic store and orders nothing, and the attendant is happy.
A parrot, organic store, orders nothing, attendant is happy. Okay. If that's where comedy is heading, it's certainly playing it safe.
The speaker in the source uses this exact skit to make the point, saying something like, man, we are heading towards this, The takeaway presented is clear. If this trend of scrutiny and potential condemnation keeps up, even the most basic setups, let alone actual jokes with any kind of edge, could become just really problematic.
And it's not just some abstract skit about 2030, right? The sources also brought up current examples.
Yes, they showed an example of scrutiny on current parodies. Specifically, a video where a man comically imitates the dancing of a TV host, Patrícia Poeta.
Okay, a parody video.
And the material immediately asks the question, in today's environment, right now, could a comical imitation like that be seen as offensive? Could it even lead to, legal action?
Which connects directly back to that core idea, doesn't it? This increasing sensitivity, the expanding scope of what's considered problematic.
Absolutely. It seems to be reaching into areas like physical parodies, stuff that might have been seen as pretty harmless before.
It really makes you wonder where the boundary lines are actually being drawn now.
It does. And what's fascinating, according to the sources, is how technology might be messing with these changing boundaries in ways we're maybe just starting to figure out.
Ah, the AI connection.
Yeah. One video was even called the Video of the Year in the source material, and an Oscar-worthy portrayal of someone identified as Daniela Lima.
Okay, this sounds like that sharp political satire mentioned in the notes. What did the sources describe about the content? What was actually in this video?
Well, the descriptions paint a picture of a woman with really exaggerated expressions, making very politically charged statements.
Like what?
The satire apparently targets specific narratives. Blaming social media for problems, declaring Lula as innocent, calling for social media regulation.
Tighter political points then.
And also blaming Bozo, which is a reference to Bolsonaro, of course, for various issues. So, yeah, directly engaging with current figures and debates.
Got it. Any other themes?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It takes on economic themes with lines like, you will eat picana again. That specific cut of beef, a political promise, and then satirizes hardship by saying people should swallow saliva if there's no water.
Ooh, that's pointed.
And there's also this satirical take on tax rhetoric. I want to pay taxes. Throw me against the wall and punch taxes into me.
Right. And something about memes.
Yes. Includes the idea of blaming memes for falling government popularity. Memes kill. Memes assault. We need to regulate memes.
Okay, so clearly very topical satire.
And the speaker in the source was obviously really struck by how effective it was. They stated the strong belief that it just perfectly captured the essence of this Daniela Lima figure.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Based on the material you mentioned, the speaker suspects this video. It's AI generated.
That's a speculation, yeah. And they give specific visual cues as reasons.
Such as?
They mention how a jacket falls unnatural, like it doesn't quite behave with realistic physics.
Oh, okay. A common AI artifact.
Exactly. And also strange mouth movements that don't quite sync up or look fully natural. These are the kinds of things you often see in current AI video generation, where it's still, learning to simulate complex, realistic movement and expressions perfectly.
So if AI can now create politically charged satire that's seen as this effective, this potentially spot on, what does that mean for the whole censorship conversation?
Well, it raises a pretty significant question, doesn't it? If human comedians face increasing constraints, real consequences, but AI can produce similar, maybe even sharper content.
Content that exists outside those traditional human gatekeepers.
Right. Does the boundary of acceptable expression just move? Does it shift to a different medium or a different kind of creator entirely?
That's a powerful tension the sources highlight. And speaking of real-world consequences, the material shifts to a much more serious example, the case of the comedian Léo Lins.
Yeah, this case really brings that abstract idea of condemning humorists into very stark, concrete reality. The sources report severe consequences for Lins.
What kind of consequences are we talking about?
Massive fines. The figure mentioned is over 2 million reais and an 8-year prison sentence.
Wait, an 8-year prison sentence specifically for telling jokes?
That's what the sources report, yes. It is a staggering level of punishment based on the material provided.
Wow. Did the sources offer any perspective on that sentence?
They included commentary from another comedian, Hélio de La Peña. He offers this perspective that maybe the limit of humor often just comes down to how much money a comedian has.
Meaning, enough money for a good lawyer.
That's the suggestion, that the issue might be less about the joke itself and more about, power dynamics and the ability to legally defend yourself.
Interesting take. What else did De La Peña say?
He argues, according to the material, that, okay, maybe Lin's jokes are distasteful, maybe they're mal gusto, bad taste, but the punishment is just wildly disproportionate.
How so? Did he compare it to anything?
He draws a really sharp contrast. Points out that individuals involved in serious crimes, things like INSS fraudsters, that's defrauding Brazil's social security system. Or people who refused vaccines during the pandemic. Or even public fund embezzlers who confessed and returned the money. These people often face less severe consequences, or sometimes remain free altogether.
So he's directly comparing a sentence for jokes against outcomes for actual financial crimes and public health issues. That's quite a comparison.
And here's a really critical point emphasized in the sources, from De La Peña's view. The sentence document itself, according to the report, explicitly states the conviction is for piada.
For joke?
Yes, for joke. Not importantly for inciting racism or another specific crime, often linked to controversial speech.
That distinction, as the sources present it, is crucial. It makes you pause and question, like De La Peña apparently does.
Is the real motive behind the condemnation just the joke content? Or are other factors maybe involved? Perhaps Lins's political stance in today's polarized environment.
That's a heavy implication.
He even uses another stark comparison, stating that a whiplash on a black delivery driver, actual physical violence that injures far more than any joke could.
And he invoked Milor Fernandes, the famous Brazilian humorist.
Yeah, brought in that quote, "No humorist shoots to kill." Highlighting the difference in intent, between humor and actual physical harm.
So the sources, through De La Peña's perspective, really push you to ask, is 8 years for telling jokes, when you look at everything else, actually a just condemnation?
It's a very challenging question, especially when you consider another dimension of Léo Lins' case presented in the sources.
Oh, what's that?
It comes from the perspectives of the very people his humor often references, people with disabilities.
Okay, this sounds like it could be a very different take.
It is. This is where the sources offer a viewpoint that might surprise you. The material includes segments showing Lins interacting directly with people with disabilities at his shows.
Right. There was a specific mention of a blind Paralympic athlete named Lorena. What happened there?
So Lorena reportedly came up on stage and gave this really striking statement. She thanked Lins specifically for his inclusion.
Inclusion, how so?
She said he doesn't exclude people like her. He actually brings them into the joke, includes them.
That's quite a counterpoint to the idea that his humor is inherently harmful to marginalized groups, isn't it?
It really is. And then according to the sources, she went on to demonstrate this unusual skill She licked her own glass eye.
She did what?
Licked her own glass eye.
Right.
Prompted this visibly surprised but also laughing reaction from both the audience and Lins himself.
Wow. Okay. That definitely takes the interaction to a level of like direct engagement with the topic of disability. It feels very different from someone just getting offended for someone else.
Absolutely. And the sources mention observations from other clips, too. Other people with disabilities expressing similar things, how Lins's humor makes them feel seen, represented, even gives them permission to laugh at their own situations.
So the perspective shared seems to be what? That humor helps.
Pretty much. The idea presented by Lins and some participants is that humor alleviates pain. And crucially, if someone jokes with you about your situation, the reaction tends to be laughter, not offense.
There was that quote attributed to Lins as well about tragedy and comedy.
Right. Life up close is a tragedy. From afar, it is a comedy. His explanation being that finding humor requires a certain distance. The pain doesn't quite reach you from that perspective.
Makes sense.
And he offers this statement, presented in the material, that it's unjust and frankly selfish for one person's optional pain.
Optional pain, meaning their choice to be offended.
That seems to be the implication, yes. That it's unjust for that optional pain to be used as justification to prevent the smiles and laughter of others who are actually involved or appreciate the humor.
What's really striking here, based on how the source is laid out, is that sharp contrast. You have individuals directly involved, often expressing appreciation, feeling included.
And then you have others outside that immediate interaction getting offended on their behalf.
It really highlights the different ways people see harm or offense in humor. It makes the whole conversation about who gets to draw the lines incredibly complex.
It absolutely does.
Okay, so finally, let's just quickly circle back to AI's role in content creation. The sources briefly showed one more AI example, right?
Yeah, just a quick look. This one was presented as a glimpse of an AI-generated TV show.
An entire TV show. And what was the reaction described in the sources to that?
Finding it very good. Even suggesting AI is much better than a lot of current human-produced TV programs.
Really? Much better.
That was the take reported, which led the speaker to predict, maybe a bit hyperbolically, but based on this glimpse.
Let me guess. Everyone in TV is going to lose their jobs to AI.
That was the prediction, yeah, that AI might just take over entertainment programming.
Okay. So we've covered a lot. The sources paint this picture of human comedy facing increased scrutiny, maybe even serious legal consequences.
And on the other hand, you have AI potentially creating sharp satire, maybe even entire entertainment programs that could kind of bypass traditional production models and gatekeepers.
It certainly presents a complex and potentially quite disruptive picture of the future of content creation and humor.
No doubt about it.
So, just to recap for everyone listening, we've unpacked the idea from the sources that comedy might be becoming more cautious. We explored how AI is already capable, it seems, of creating sharp political satire. We delved into the Léo Lins case, which really highlights concerns about freedom of expression and, well, seemingly disproportionate punishment.
And we considered that perhaps surprising perspective from those who feel included, rather than harmed, by controversial humor directed at their own groups. These sources collectively show a landscape where the rules of engagement for humor are just intensely debated and maybe being rewritten right now.
Which leaves us with this final provocative thought for you to consider, drawing only on the material we've covered today. If AI can generate uncensored, highly effective satire, maybe even better than humans in some cases, and if the debate around human comedy becomes increasingly tangled in legal consequences and who gets offended on behalf of whom, does this fundamentally change the landscape of free expression?
Or does it simply mean that challenging humor will migrate, shift to platforms and creators, maybe AI creators less susceptible to those traditional pressures?
Who ultimately gets to decide what is acceptable to joke about in this evolving world, and what role will technology actually play in that decision moving forward?
Definitely something to ponder.
Indeed. Thanks for joining us for the deep dive. We'll see you next time.